Karen rammed shopping cart into employee, repeatedly over out-of-stock sign. The supermarket buzzed with the kind of chaos only a Saturday afternoon rush could bring. Shopping carts clanked, announcements echoed overhead, and children wove recklessly through aisles while their parents barked commands. The fluorescent lights beamed harshly over the endless sea of shoppers, creating a tense atmosphere of urgency and impatience. In aisle 8, Dylan adjusted the last crate of canned goods onto the bottom shelf, his fingers smudged with the metallic scent of packaging dust. It was his third shift of the week, and though his feet ached and his patience was thinning, he kept his customer service smile at the ready. At 17, he was used to being overlooked, a helpful blur in the eyes of hurried customers. He glanced at his watch and sighed, nodding he still had 3 more hours before he could clock out and finally catch the new superhero movie with his friends. Just as he was about to straighten the out-of-stock sign next to the empty space where the popular artisan sparkling water used to be, a piercing voice sliced through the ambient noise. "Excuse me." The voice was sharp, grating, and carried with it the entitled pitch of someone who expected immediate compliance. Dylan turned, spotting her instantly, a woman in her late 40s, platinum blonde bob with dark roots and a glare that could peel paint. Her cart was already half full with overpriced gluten-free snacks and imported cheese wheels. She pointed an accusatory finger at the sign as if it had personally insulted her. "Is this a joke?" Dylan wiped his hands on his apron and walked over, trying to keep his tone steady and polite. "Hi there. Sorry, but yeah, that brand sold out for today. We should have it restocked by Tuesday." Karen, though he didn't know her name yet, he could sense the archetype forming instantly, stared at him as if he'd just confessed to murder. "Tuesday? That's unacceptable. This is the only sparkling water my body tolerates. I need it now." He gestured helplessly to the shelf. "I understand. It's been popular lately. We had a shipment this morning, but it's sold out in about an hour. I'm really sorry." Karen took a deliberate step forward, pushing her cart with theatrical force so the front of it nudged Dylan's shin. He winced slightly but didn't react beyond that. "I'm not interested in your excuses. Go check the back. I know you people always hide extra stock for your friends." He blinked, unsure if she was being serious or if this was just her way of throwing a tantrum. "Ma'am, I really don't think." "Don't think," she snapped, cutting him off mid-sentence. "Do as you're told. You don't get paid to think." Several heads turned at that. A middle-aged man paused while reaching for cereal and exchanged a look with another shopper, both of them subtly shaking their heads. Dylan kept his expression neutral, though his cheeks warmed with embarrassment. He was used to rude customers, but this one had a venom that went deeper than usual. "I promise we don't have any left. I checked the pallet myself," he said, maintaining composure. "And my manager isn't on the floor at the moment. But if you'd like, I can leave a note and ask him to call you as soon as we get more in." Karen rolled her eyes so dramatically it looked painful. "Oh, how convenient. No manager, no water, and a lazy teenager giving me attitude." She slammed her palm against the metal of the cart handle. "I deserve better treatment than this." Dylan took a small step back, keeping a calm distance between himself and the increasingly aggressive customer. "I'm just trying to help, ma'am." "No, you're trying to ruin my weekend," she shrieked. "I came here to do my shopping, and now you're telling me the one thing I need for my wellness cleanse is unavailable because you people can't do your jobs." Before he could respond, she yanked the cart backward and then, without warning, rammed it forward with enough force to knock him off balance. The cart struck him square in the thigh, and he stumbled back into the shelf, catching himself with his hand. Pain throbbed through his leg as he stared at her, stunned. Karen wasn't done. She reversed the cart again with the same deliberate motion, then slammed it forward a second time, clipping his shin. Dylan let out a yelp as the metal edge dug into his leg, and he dropped to one knee instinctively, shielding himself. A few gasps erupted nearby. A young mom with a toddler in tow stepped away from the aisle, eyes wide. A teenager holding a phone whispered to a friend, already beginning to record. The situation had escalated in seconds. "Ma'am, stop!" A man called from behind, trying to push past the cart traffic to intervene. "You're hurting him." Karen whirled around, her eyes wild, hair slightly frizzed from the motion. "Mind your own damn business. This punk is refusing to serve a paying customer. He thinks he's above his station." "I said stop." Another voice, this time firmer, female, joined the rising voices. But Karen only screamed louder. "I will not be silenced. I'm a tax-paying citizen and I know my rights. I'll have all of you arrested for harassment." Dylan tried to crawl backward, using the shelving unit for support as he grimaced in pain. His leg throbbed, and he could already feel the sting of bruises forming. One of the nearby employees finally broke through the crowd and pulled Karen's cart away with effort. She resisted, shrieking louder, grabbing the cart and yanking it back, nearly hitting another shopper in the process. The air was thick with tension, people shouting, phones recording, children crying. It felt surreal, like a dream tilting into a nightmare. Just then, the store's security guards appeared, two burly men in dark polo shirts. One immediately stepped between Karen and Dylan, the other reached for his radio. "Back away from the employee, ma'am." "Now," the first said, sternly but calmly. Karen's hands flew up. "Finally, someone competent. Arrest him. He assaulted me. This is discrimination. He's probably high. Look at his eyes." Security didn't even blink. The second guard was already kneeling beside Dylan, checking if he could stand, speaking into his shoulder mic to request medical assistance. The first guard gently but firmly took Karen by the arm, trying to move her away from the injured teen. "I will sue all of you," she shrieked as she was escorted toward the front of the store, her voice echoing like nails on a chalkboard. "This will be on the news. You'll all regret this." But she had no idea that it already was. Several shoppers had their phones out, and the footage of her rant and violent outburst was already uploading. Dylan leaned against the shelving unit, blinking through the pain as the second guard helped him to his feet. His mind buzzed with adrenaline and disbelief, unsure how a simple out-of-stock sign had turned into an assault. Around him, the hum of the supermarket resumed, but now it carried a buzz of scandal and shock, and whispers followed Karen's departure like a trail of gasoline. Something told him this wasn't over, not by a long shot. The cold compress wrapped tightly around Dylan's leg offered some relief, but not enough to quiet the ache in his muscles or the swirl of emotion lodged in his chest. He sat stiffly in the back room of the store, on a battered metal chair next to the lockers, while one of the assistant managers paced nervously by the phone. His shift was supposed to end soon, but instead of preparing to go home, he was nursing bruises, flinching from the dull pulse of pain, and preparing to file an incident report. The quiet hum of the break room fridge felt unnaturally loud after the chaos of the sales floor. Every time he closed his eyes, he could still see the crazed glare in Karen's eyes, still feel the sharp jolt of the cart slamming into his body. What baffled him the most wasn't the pain, it was how fast everything had escalated. One moment she was demanding sparkling water, and the next, she was attacking him in front of dozens of customers, screaming like he'd betrayed her family. The assistant manager, Corey, finally stopped packing and turned toward Dylan, holding a clipboard and looking more flustered than concerned. "Okay, man, I called corporate and let them know what happened," Corey said, running a hand through his thinning hair. "They said to make sure you fill this out before you leave and take photos of your leg for documentation. The security team already pulled the footage and sent it to them. You're not in trouble or anything. It's just protocol." Dylan nodded, taking the clipboard, though his hands trembled slightly. "Is she still here?" Corey shook his head. "The cops took her. She was resisting arrest like crazy too, screaming the whole time. Apparently, she even tried to throw a loaf of bread at one of the officers on her way out. You're lucky she didn't grab something heavier." The absurdity of it might have been funny if Dylan didn't feel so rattled. He set the clipboard down on the table beside him and leaned forward, burying his face in his hands for a moment. "I don't get it. All this, over water." That brand has a weird cult following, Corey muttered. Some people think it's made with melted Icelandic glaciers or some crap like that. But really, that woman just looked unhinged. She wanted a fight. Dylan sat back, exhaling through his nose. His leg throbbed when he moved, and his pride still stung from being humiliated in front of so many people. She said I was hiding the water, like I'm secretly hoarding it in the back or something. Yeah, she said a lot of things. None of it made sense. Corey rubbed his temples. You sure you're okay to get home? I can call someone for you. Dylan shook his head. I'll be fine. I'll call my mom. She's probably on her way already. I think someone from the store called her. At that moment, the door opened, and Dylan's mother stepped in with a frantic energy that filled the small room like a gust of wind. She looked from Dylan's bruised leg to the ice pack, then to his face, and in an instant her arms were around him. I came as soon as I heard, she whispered, her voice tight with emotion. Are you okay? Oh my God, Dylan, are you okay? He nodded against her shoulder. Yeah, I mean it hurts, but I'm okay. It just happened so fast. She pulled back, cupping his face like he was 5 years old again, checking for any sign of damage that wasn't visible. They said she rammed you with a cart, repeatedly. 3 times, he muttered, and she was screaming the whole time. Corey stepped in, clearing his throat. Ma'am, your son handled himself with a lot of maturity. He didn't lash out. He didn't even raise his voice. We're going to give him paid leave until this is resolved, and the company is covering any medical expenses. His mother gave a sharp nod, but her attention was back on Dylan. We're going to the clinic to get that leg looked at. You don't know if anything's fractured. He didn't argue. The adrenaline had worn off, and now that the chaos was behind him, all that was left was soreness and fatigue. As they made their way through the store toward the exit, shoppers still hovered near the aisle where it happened. Some were recounting the story to new arrivals. Others were watching the video on their phones, showing their companions the footage someone had uploaded. Karen's shrill voice and Dylan's frightened posture were frozen in time, looped endlessly on social media, already gaining thousands of views. Outside, a news van was parked near the lot entrance, and a local reporter was filming a segment in front of the store. Dylan instinctively turned his face away, but it was too late. Someone pointed him out, and the reporter broke away from her cameraman and called out to him. Excuse me, Dylan, right? We'd love a quick comment if you're up for it, just to clear the air. What happened today? He hesitated, caught in the headlights of the moment. His mother took a protective step forward, shielding him slightly with her body. No comment. He's a minor and he's hurt. But Dylan, suddenly aware of how much public attention this was getting, lifted his head and said in a tired but clear voice, I just hope people treat store workers better. We're not robots. We're not punching bags. The reporter blinked, surprised by the statement's weight. She thanked him and backed off. As they reached the car, Dylan slumped into the passenger seat and stared out the window. His phone buzzed endlessly in his pocket. When he finally checked it, he saw texts from classmates, coworkers, even people he hadn't spoken to since middle school. Some were messages of support, others linked to the video. The caption read, Karen attacks teen employee over out-of-stock water. Cart Karen. He groaned softly. Great, I'm a meme now. His mom glanced at him as she started the car. You're a victim, and you did nothing wrong. Don't forget that. He knew she was right, but it didn't change the feeling of exposure crawling under his skin. He never wanted attention. All he'd done was show up for work, do his job, and tell the truth. Now he was being dissected online while some unhinged woman screamed about conspiracies and persecution. As they drove to the clinic, a silent thought bloomed in Dylan's mind. If this was going viral now, it meant Karen wouldn't be able to hide. Not from the law, not from the public. And something told him she was about to learn just how far that video would reach. The days following the incident unfolded with dizzying speed, as if the entire world had latched onto the moment Dylan had become the unwilling star of a viral video. What had started as shaky smartphone footage from a shocked shopper soon exploded into a media storm. Local news ran segments with bold headlines like "Teen Employee Assaulted Over Sparkling Water," and national outlets quickly picked up the story, dubbing the attacker Cart Cairn with ruthless consistency. The video had been viewed over 5 million times by the time Dylan limped back from the clinic with a sprained knee, his doctor warning him to avoid putting weight on it for at least a week. He spent those days off school and work lying on the couch, icing his leg and scrolling through a digital tidal wave of outrage, support, and even hate. People he'd never met praised him for his calmness, while others picked apart his appearance, accused him of faking the injury, or insisted the video was staged. It was surreal to be both championed and criticized by total strangers, all while his leg throbbed and the walls of his house felt like they were closing in from the scrutiny. Meanwhile, Cairn's identity had been uncovered within 48 hours. Internet sleuths needed little more than the video and the location to connect the dots. Her name was Sylvia Carver, a 48-year-old wellness blogger with a history of unhinged social media rants about GMOs, fluoride conspiracies, and anti-vaccine propaganda. Old posts began surfacing, tirades against lazy youth, smug photo shoots with detox teas, and one particularly damning video where she yelled at a flight attendant for offering her toxic bottled water. The public backlash was immediate and unforgiving. Sponsors dropped her blog hosting account shut down for violation of terms, and her YouTube channel, where she once gave advice on spiritual hydration and hormonal balancing, was flooded with angry comments until it was ultimately deleted. Yet despite the mounting fallout, Cairn, or Sylvia, refused to back down. She released a grainy, teary-eyed selfie video from what appeared to be a motel bathroom. In it, she insisted she had been the true victim, that Dylan had mocked her, rolled his eyes, and disrespected her health needs. She claimed the cart barely touched him and that the video was manipulated by woke leftist kids and Big Soda. The response was brutal. Comments mocked her, duetted her video with memes, and dissected every lie. She had underestimated how unforgiving the internet could be, especially when her actions were so clearly caught on camera. Yet still, she doubled down, hiring a lawyer and declaring she would fight the defamation campaign against her in court. That, however, only fueled the fire. More people shared the original footage, pointing out her falsehoods with glee. And when the supermarket finally issued a formal statement banning her from all national locations for life, the story reached its boiling point. For Dylan, it was a strange kind of vindication. He hadn't asked to be a symbol. All he'd wanted was to finish his shift and go home. But now he was being called brave by strangers, invited onto talk shows, even approached by a local nonprofit that wanted him to speak about workplace safety for youth. Despite the swelling attention, he stayed grounded, choosing to speak publicly only once, during a live interview with a calm, respectful journalist from a local station who let him speak his truth without sensationalism. He sat in a quiet park with the woman, answering her questions with maturity beyond his years. He spoke about how scary it had been, how surreal it was to be attacked in such a public space, and how important it was for people to treat service workers with basic dignity. "I wasn't looking for a moment," Dylan had said into the microphone, his voice steady. "I was just doing my job, and I think that's what a lot of people miss. People in retail, fast food, grocery, we're not invisible, we're human beings." The clip of that interview was shared almost as widely as the original assault video. It shifted the tone of the conversation, turning it from outrage to admiration. Even schools began using his statement in digital citizenship classes. Messages poured in from teens working their first jobs, thanking him for speaking up. Some even said it gave them the courage to report their own abusive customers. Dylan, however, remained quietly reserved, declining offers to turn the moment into money or merchandise. He had no interest in becoming a brand. He just wanted to return to normal. But Cairn, or rather Sylvia, wasn't finished making noise. Her court date was set for the following week, and the anticipation surrounding it was absurd. Outside the courthouse, reporters jockeyed for position as if it were a celebrity trial. Protesters and pranksters held signs reading "Cart Cairn for Congress" and "Don't tread on teenagers." Dylan arrived with his mother, walking carefully on a brace, eyes lowered beneath the brim of his hoodie. The building buzzed with murmurs as cameras flashed. Inside, Cairn's legal team tried to spin the narrative of mental instability, claiming she had suffered from acute emotional distress due to dietary imbalances and was therefore not responsible for her actions. The judge's expression throughout was unreadable, but his silence was damning. When Dylan took the stand, he recounted everything with a quiet eloquence that silenced the room. He didn't embellish, didn't exaggerate. He described the look in her eyes, the jolt of the cart, the helplessness he felt as she came at him again and again. The footage was played again, now officially admitted as evidence. Cairn squirmed in her seat but didn't look away. Dylan noticed, for the first time, that she looked smaller now, diminished somehow without the chaos of the supermarket to hide her fury. No crowd to scream at, no cart to wield like a weapon. Just a woman with hollow eyes, her social power stripped away by her own actions. Witness after witness testified. Shoppers who had tried to stop her, employees who had known Dylan as polite and hardworking, even a manager from another store who described her past behavior, threats over coupons, a demand to search behind refrigerated shelves. The prosecution had no shortage of examples to show this wasn't a one-time outburst but a pattern of entitlement and aggression. Her lawyer's defense grew weaker by the hour. The closing arguments wrapped just before sunset, the courthouse bathed in the warm orange glow of early evening. Dylan sat beside his mother, feeling the exhaustion of the entire week crashing down on him like a wave. The jury was out less than 2 hours. When they returned, the verdict was clear. Guilty on all counts: assault, disorderly conduct, resisting arrest, and endangerment of a minor. The judge ordered immediate sentencing the next day. As Dylan stood outside the courthouse, reporters again surrounded him, but this time he didn't flinch. His mother put a hand on his shoulder, steady and proud. He answered a single question before leaving. "What do you want people to learn from this?" He thought for a moment, then looked directly into the camera. "It costs nothing to be kind," he said simply, "but sometimes being cruel costs everything." The courtroom was less crowded the following morning, but the tension in the air felt even heavier. The drama of the trial had already played out, with the world watching as Sylvia "Cart Cairn" Carver was found guilty on all charges. Now it was time for sentencing, and though the media circus outside had slightly thinned, the stakes within had only intensified. Dylan sat in the front row beside his mother, his knee still wrapped beneath the dark fabric of his dress pants, a brace hidden from view but present in every slight wince as he shifted in his seat. He felt emotionally numb, not because he didn't care about the outcome, but because everything had unfolded so rapidly, he hadn't had a moment to catch his breath. The weight of the experience, the public scrutiny, the physical pain, and the surreal nature of being caught in a whirlwind of viral fame, all of it had built into a silent pressure inside him that hadn't yet found release. Sylvia sat at the defense table, her once bold demeanor now diluted into a nervous, jittery quiet. Her hair, once stiff with product and pride, looked limp and unkempt. She wore a bland beige suit, clearly borrowed or hastily purchased, and her eyes flickered between the floor and her folded hands as her attorney whispered something in her ear. Despite her earlier defiance, her lawyer had reportedly advised a change in tone, and now Sylvia appeared smaller, softer, as though her ego had shriveled in the harsh light of public judgment. But for Dylan, her transformation felt too little, too late. He had already seen the damage she was capable of. He had lived it. The bruises on his leg had faded into mottled yellow and green, but the sense of violation still lingered. The judge entered, and the room rose and then settled with that collective hush that only comes when finality is near. Papers shuffled. A bailiff called for order. The judge, a stern, silver-haired man with deep-set eyes and the kind of voice that commanded silence without needing to raise it, adjusted his glasses and looked down at the file before him. "Ms. Carver," he began, folding his hands, "you have been convicted of multiple charges, including assault of a minor and resisting arrest. Before I deliver your sentence, I will allow you the opportunity to speak. Do you have anything to say?" All eyes turned to Sylvia. She hesitated, clearly battling the instinct to lash out with indignation. The pause stretched long enough that Dylan wondered if she would refuse. But then she stood, shoulders squared, and approached the podium. Her voice, when it came, was thin and rasping. "I've made mistakes," she said, avoiding eye contact with anyone. "I wasn't in a good place mentally. I was under stress. I overreacted, and I regret how things unfolded." She glanced at Dylan for only a second before lowering her eyes again. "I didn't mean to hurt anyone. Her voice cracked and she quickly looked away. "I let my frustration get the better of me." There was no apology, no direct acknowledgement of her cruelty, no admission that she had struck him repeatedly with intent. Dylan felt his jaw tighten, his knuckles whiten around the edge of the bench. Even now, she couched her actions in vague justifications, as if her bad day could explain away everything. The judge's face didn't move, unreadable as he listened, then nodded once when she finished and returned to her seat. "Thank you," he said flatly. "Now then." The silence deepened. "In considering sentencing, I reviewed your past behavior both in and outside of this courtroom. You have demonstrated a pattern of entitlement, aggression, and a concerning lack of remorse. Your actions were not the result of a momentary lapse, but a culmination of behavior that has gone unchecked for far too long. You attacked a minor, in public, in broad daylight, and you did so without provocation. Worse, when confronted, you attempted to manipulate the situation, blame the victim, and gaslight witnesses. And even now, your so-called apology lacks substance." He paused, letting the words sink in. "You are hereby sentenced to serve 4 years in a state correctional facility, with eligibility for parole after 2, contingent on your participation in anger management counseling, and a demonstrated behavioral reform. Additionally, you are ordered to complete 380 hours of community service, specifically assigned to roadside cleanup along the very highway that leads to the supermarket where this event took place. You are also prohibited from entering any retail establishment in this chain for the duration of your probation, which will extend an additional 2 years post-incarceration. Your conduct has consequences, Ms. Carver, and today, you will begin facing them." Sylvia stood frozen. Her mouth opened slightly as if to protest, but her attorney gently touched her arm, silently advising her to stay quiet. She slumped back into her seat, visibly trembling. A bailiff approached, securing handcuffs around her wrists with a dull metallic snap. The click echoed in the still courtroom like a final exclamation point. Dylan felt something shift in his chest, not joy, not triumph, but a solemn, cathartic release. The storm that had upended his life had finally reached its eye, and for the first time since it began, he could breathe without flinching. Outside the courthouse, reporters waited eagerly, but Dylan's mother led him through a side exit, away from the flashing cameras. They walked in silence until they reached the car, where Dylan leaned against the door and exhaled slowly. The sunlight was warm, the sky was clear, and though the world still buzzed with headlines and hashtags, he felt, for once, unseen. It was a good feeling. In the days that followed, the story continued to ripple outward. Talk shows debated the role of entitlement in public spaces. Psychology blogs explored the rise of consumer rage and its impact on service workers. Opinion pieces called for stronger protections for teen employees and demanded better training for handling aggressive customers. Dylan's name was mentioned in some of them, but more often he was symbolized. The kid at the store, the victim of the cart attack, the teen who stayed calm. It was strange to be distilled into a narrative, even a sympathetic one, but Dylan took it in stride. He had no desire to chase the attention. His brief brush with viral fame had left him wiser, quieter, more deliberate. He turned down most interview requests. When his school offered to let him give a speech about resilience, he politely declined. The truth was, he didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to go back to being a normal kid, to graduate, to find a better job, to maybe study something meaningful. What had happened to him wasn't a career. It was a moment, and now it was over. One evening, a letter arrived at his house. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a typed message. No signature, just a sentence. "I don't expect forgiveness, but I am sorry." Dylan stared at it for a long time. He said nothing. He didn't know if it was real or if it even mattered, but he folded it neatly and tucked it into the back of his desk drawer. Not everything needed a response. Some stories just needed to end. The summer came slowly that year, dragging its feet like it was hesitant to arrive after the storm that had passed. For Dylan, the days began to blur again, not in chaos but in quiet. The media frenzy had finally begun to die down, like a fire that had burned itself out. Fewer calls came from reporters, the texts from classmates fizzled into silence, and even the memes that had once made him flinch when scrolling through social media had faded beneath the next trending disaster. The world, as it always did, moved on. And for once, Dylan was glad to be left behind. He no longer had to wear the invisible badge of victimhood that had followed him through every hallway at school and every aisle in public. No longer did strangers whisper his name in checkout lines or offer him awkward thumbs up as if he were some local legend. He was just Dylan again, just a 17-year-old with a sore knee, a careful smile, and a lingering memory of how fast a normal day could tilt into something unreal. He didn't return to the supermarket. After everything, it felt like the last place he could ever truly feel safe. Even though the company had offered him a different store or a promotion if he stayed, he declined with the same calm politeness he had used to face the woman who changed everything. Instead, he took a summer job at a bookstore near the edge of town, quiet, shaded by big oaks, and filled with the smell of old pages and soft conversation. It suited him. Customers here rarely raised their voices, and the most controversial question was whether the new sci-fi novel deserved its bestseller status. The people were kinder, or maybe just less rushed, and Dylan found peace in the stillness of it all. His knee healed slowly, and so did his mind. He found himself smiling more, talking more freely, and even laughing without that hitch in his chest. Sometimes trauma didn't scream when it left, it simply stopped echoing, and that in itself was a kind of freedom. At home, things had settled into a different rhythm too. His mother, always protective, had become softer in her worry. She no longer hovered at the edge of every conversation, waiting for signs that he was slipping beneath the surface. They spoke more, shared more. She told him stories about her own teenage years, and he listened with fresh ears, realizing that adults were just older versions of kids who had once been scared too. In the evenings, they cooked together, watched bad movies, and filled their little house with the kinds of small joys that didn't go viral but mattered so much more. The town eventually replaced the faded newspaper headline of "Cart Cairn sentenced" with new scandals, new distractions. But there was still a quiet reverence for what had happened. Like a bruise, the community remembered not to press too hard. The supermarket posted a public sign thanking its employees for their service, and quietly rolled out new training protocols to protect workers from customer abuse. A few schools in the district started adding modules about emotional intelligence and workplace rights to their life orientation classes, and while Dylan wasn't credited directly, he knew his story had left a mark. Not a big one, not world-changing, but enough to make people pause the next time they wanted to lash out at someone in uniform. One afternoon, Dylan received a letter from the district's youth advocacy office. They had partnered with a local nonprofit to host a panel on teen worker safety and had reserved a seat for him if he wanted it. He stared at the envelope for a long time, sitting on the back step of his house, letting the wind tug at the edges of the paper. He thought about speaking, standing up before a crowd, telling them what it had felt like to be helpless and scared with a shopping cart ramming into his knees. He thought about telling them how hard it was to fall asleep after going viral, how shame and attention were sometimes the same thing in a teenager's brain. But then he thought about the silence of the bookstore, the sound of rain against its wide front window, and the old woman who came in every Tuesday to ask for new crossword puzzle books. He thought about peace and choice, and how power wasn't always about who shouted the loudest. It was about knowing when to walk away. He folded the letter and set it aside, not ready to decide, not needing to. Some stories didn't need speeches. Some victories came quietly. And then one morning, something unexpected happened. A car pulled into the bookstore's small parking lot. A woman stepped out, not Karen, but someone younger, with the same shaped eyes and a nervous stiffness to her walk. She entered the store and looked around until she spotted him. Dylan was at the counter, sorting bookmarks. "Are you Dylan?" she asked softly, her voice barely above the hum of the air conditioner. He nodded slowly. "Yeah, can I help you?" She hesitated, then stepped closer. I'm Sylvia's daughter. I just wanted to say I'm sorry for everything. What she did, there's no excuse, but I thought, you should know not everyone in her family thinks like she does. I didn't know how to reach out before." Dylan blinked, stunned. He hadn't even known Karen had children. He cleared his throat, uncertain what to say. "Thank you, that means a lot." She gave him a small nod, eyes glossy but resolute. "She's in prison now, writing letters. Some of them sound like she's starting to get it. Maybe not fully, but she's not screaming about conspiracies anymore. That's something, I guess." Dylan smiled gently. "Yeah, it's a start." She left without buying anything, and Dylan didn't stop her. But as the door closed behind her and the bell above it jingled faintly, he felt a surprising sense of closure, like a circle had drawn itself in full without him needing to force it. He returned to his counter, the smell of paper and ink all around him, and turned the page of the book he had been reading before she came in. Outside, the world kept moving, cars passing, birds singing, the breeze rustling through tree branches. And inside, Dylan finally exhaled, not with tension but with peace. He didn't know what would come next, and that was okay. The chapter had ended. The story was done. And for once there was no cliffhanger, just calm, just quiet. Just a boy with a book in a bookstore, free at last from the weight of a story he never asked to be part of, and strong enough to move forward without carrying it anymore.